My girlfriend smirked. "Come on, you'd crumble without me." I answered, "Really now?" Then I grabbed the position internationally, found Interim Accommodation, and set up Postal Rerouting. When she appeared at my previous flat with a monologue ready, the current occupant greeted the knock instead. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags when Natalie literally redesigned my entire Denver penthouse within our first month of dating, but I was too impressed by her confidence to recognize it as conquest. I'm Trevor, 36, an aerospace engineer specializing in satellite systems, and I thought I'd found someone who appreciated the finer things I'd worked hard to afford. What I actually found was someone who saw my comfortable life as raw material for her personal vision project. The transformation started innocently enough. Natalie would suggest we try a new restaurant instead of my beloved food truck on Larimer Street, claiming she wanted to expand my culinary horizons. She'd replace my weekend hiking gear with invitations to gallery openings, explaining that successful couples need to be seen in the right circles. My practical wardrobe somehow became an embarrassment that required immediate designer intervention. "Trevor, you can't wear khakis to a wine tasting," she'd say, steering me toward Italian suits that cost more than some people's rent. The most painful part was watching my home workshop disappear piece by piece. I'd spent years building intricate drone prototypes in my converted second bedroom, cutting-edge models that pushed civilian technology boundaries. These weren't toys. They were proof-of-concept designs that occasionally caught interest from aerospace contractors. But Natalie saw them differently. "Honey, we're trying to create a showcase home here. These expensive toys are cluttering our living space." Our living space. The apartment lease was in my name, paid from my salary, but somehow it had become ours while my hobbies became intrusions. I watched her systematically box up my soldering equipment, my testing rigs, my carefully organized component libraries. "We can set up a proper office space once we find a bigger place," she promised, but those boxes ended up in the building's storage unit, forgotten except when I had to explain to colleagues why I'd stopped bringing innovative prototypes to industry meetups. The gradual erosion was masterful in its subtlety. She'd plan elaborate dinner parties that required days of preparation and hundreds of dollars in imported ingredients, then act genuinely confused when I suggested ordering pizza and watching a movie instead. "Trevor, we have an image to maintain. People expect a certain standard from successful couples like us." When had I agreed to being half of a successful couple, rather than just being myself? The worst part wasn't the expensive dinners or designer clothes or even losing my workshop. It was realizing I'd started asking permission for basic decisions. "Is it okay if I grab lunch with my college roommate? Would you mind if I spent Saturday working on that drone project? Do you think it's appropriate for me to wear the blue shirt to your friend's engagement party?" I'd become a guest in my own life, seeking approval for choices that used to be automatic. My friends noticed the change before I did. "Dude, you used to be the guy with strong opinions about everything from quantum computing to which trail had the best sunrise views," my hiking buddy Marcus observed during one of our increasingly rare weekend trips. "Now you check your phone every 10 minutes like you're waiting for instructions." He was right. I'd become someone who needed guidance on decisions I'd been making independently for 36 years. Natalie's expertise in luxury brand consulting had somehow extended to managing my entire existence, and I'd mistaken her control for care, her demands for standards, her criticism for improvement. The breaking point should have come sooner, but comfortable people like me tend to adapt gradually to uncomfortable situations. We adjust our expectations downward degree by degree until we're living lives we barely recognize as our own. I kept telling myself that relationships require compromise, that successful couples build shared visions, that maybe I really did need someone to push me toward better versions of myself. What I didn't realize was that Natalie wasn't interested in better versions of me. She wanted a different person entirely, someone who existed primarily to validate her sophisticated lifestyle and social ambitions. The man who built satellite guidance systems for a living had somehow convinced himself he was incapable of navigating his own daily choices. Then my company offered me the opportunity that would change everything, leading their new satellite defense project at our London headquarters, a 3-year assignment representing the absolute pinnacle of my career in aerospace engineering. I'd been working toward this kind of position for over a decade, the type of role that opens doors to military contracts and cutting-edge space technology development. When I walked into our penthouse that evening with the official offer letter, my hands were actually shaking with excitement. This wasn't just a promotion, it was validation that my years of designing guidance systems and pushing technological boundaries had been recognized at the highest corporate levels. I found Natalie in her home office, surrounded by mood boards and fabric samples for an upcoming charity gala she was organizing, another one of those networking events that had become central to our social calendar. "Nat, you're not going to believe what happened today," I started, but she held up one perfectly manicured finger without looking up from her laptop screen. "Hold that thought, honey. I'm trying to finalize the seating arrangements for next week's fundraiser. Do you think the Hendersons should sit with the Morrison Group, or would that create tension over the whole country club incident?" I waited, watching her move digital nameplates around a virtual table like she was orchestrating international diplomacy. Finally, she glanced up with that practiced smile she reserved for when she needed to appear interested in my work-related interruptions. "Okay, what's got you so animated? Did they finally approve your budget for those drone components you wanted?" The casual dismissal in her tone, reducing my entire career to hobby-level procurement, should have been my first warning about how this conversation would unfold. They offered me the London position, the satellite defense project I've been hoping for. 3 years, full executive package, leading a team of 12 engineers on military-grade navigation systems. For exactly 3 seconds, Natalie's face showed genuine surprise, maybe even excitement. Then something calculating flickered in her eyes, and I watched her mental gears shift into planning mode. She closed her laptop with deliberate precision and turned to face me fully, her expression transforming into the strategic focus I'd seen her use with difficult clients. "London," she repeated, as if testing how the word felt in her mouth. "When do we leave?" "I'll need at least 6 weeks to coordinate the international shipping for my wardrobe collections. The vintage pieces alone will require climate-controlled transportation, and I'll have to research the right social circles there. This could actually be perfect timing. I've been wanting to expand my consulting work into European luxury markets." The assumption was so absolute, so unquestioned, that it took me a moment to process what I'd just heard. Not congratulations on the achievement I'd been working toward for years. Not questions about what the role entailed or how I felt about this massive career milestone. Just immediate logistics about her wardrobe and social positioning, as if my professional triumph existed primarily to facilitate her international ambitions. "I was thinking I might go alone initially," I said carefully, "to get established and find us proper housing before you join me." The words hung in the air like I'd suggested we move to Mars. Natalie stared at me with the kind of genuine bewilderment usually reserved for people who claimed the Earth was flat. Her head tilted slightly, and I could practically see her recalibrating everything she thought she understood about this situation. "Alone." The single word carried layers of incredulity, as if I'd proposed abandoning civilization entirely. "Trevor, this is exactly the kind of opportunity that elevates power couples to the next level internationally. Do you have any idea what kind of connections we could build in London's aerospace and luxury sectors? The networking potential alone is worth the relocation investment." Power couples. There it was again, that phrase that had gradually replaced any individual identity I might have maintained. I wasn't Trevor who'd earned a significant promotion through technical expertise and leadership capabilities. I was half of a power couple whose achievement existed primarily to enhance our collective social standing. I just thought it might be easier to focus on the work initially without worrying about all the relocation logistics. I tried again, but Natalie was already shaking her head with that patient expression she used when explaining obvious things to obviously confused people. "Honey, you can't be serious. Come on, Trevor, you'd crumble without me." The words hit me like a physical blow, delivered with such casual certainty that they carried the weight of absolute truth in her mind. "You can't even pick out a decent wine without my guidance, and you'd probably live on cereal and wear the same shirt 3 days running. London's social scene is incredibly sophisticated. You'd be completely lost without someone who understands how to navigate those circles properly." I stood there in my own penthouse, holding the offer letter for the most important position of my career, listening to the woman I'd been planning to eventually marry explain why I was fundamentally incapable of basic human function. The casual cruelty wasn't intentional, that almost made it worse. She genuinely believed every word she was saying, had convinced herself that I was some helpless creature who required constant management to avoid embarrassing us both in civilized society. That night, lying awake while Natalie researched London's luxury shopping districts on her phone, something crystallized in my mind with the clarity of a perfectly calibrated navigation system. I'd spent my entire career solving complex engineering problems through methodical analysis and precise execution, yet I'd somehow convinced myself that my personal life was too complicated for the same approach. Her words kept echoing, "You'd crumble without me." The engineer in me wanted to test that hypothesis empirically, and I realized I had the perfect laboratory, a 3-year London assignment with complete autonomy to prove or disprove her theory. Over the next 2 weeks, I began what I internally called Operation Satellite, the most complex engineering project of my life, requiring precision timing, encrypted communications, and absolutely zero margin for error. I contacted my company's executive relocation services, explaining that my domestic situation had become complicated and requesting complete discretion in my move arrangements. The beauty of working for a multinational aerospace corporation was their experience handling executives who needed to relocate quietly due to sensitive personal circumstances. Within 48 hours, I had access to a dedicated relocation specialist who operated through encrypted corporate channels and treated confidentiality as a matter of professional survival. Jennifer Walsh, my assigned coordinator, had 23 years of experience moving high-level executives across continents without leaving digital footprints that curious parties might follow. Mr. Morrison, we've handled situations requiring complete operational security before, she assured me during our initial video call, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who'd orchestrated far more complex relocations than mine. Your London arrangements can be managed entirely through corporate housing partnerships, with all communications routed through secured company systems that maintain executive privacy standards. Within a week, she'd arranged a luxury serviced apartment in Canary Wharf, 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, stunning views of the Thames, and most importantly, a lease agreement that existed only in corporate databases that Natalie would never think to access. The apartment came fully furnished with modern minimalist decor that felt more authentically me than anything in our Denver penthouse had for months. Jennifer even arranged for a secure workspace where I could rebuild my drone laboratory without anyone questioning expensive component deliveries or prototype testing equipment. Meanwhile, I maintained the facade of planning our joint relocation with Academy Award-worthy performance skills I didn't know I possessed. I researched neighborhoods we might enjoy together, forwarded apartment listings that would appeal to Natalie's luxury standards, and discussed shipping logistics for her extensive wardrobe with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely invested in our shared future. The most challenging aspect was arranging new tenant placement for our penthouse lease, which existed solely in my name due to Natalie's preference for keeping finances separate, a decision that now worked entirely in my favor. Through my company's legal department, I connected with a corporate housing service that specialized in placing relocated executives in premium Denver properties. They had a waiting list of aerospace contractors who needed temporary housing during project assignments, and our penthouse checked every box on their requirements list. The timing had to be surgical, new tenant move-in scheduled for exactly 24 hours after my departure, with lease transfer paperwork dated weeks earlier to establish legal precedent. But the most intricate part of Operation Satellite involved Natalie's belongings, because despite everything, I wasn't interested in destroying her life, just escaping it. I hired specialized moving services with very specific instructions. My possessions, including every component of my carefully organized drone laboratory, would be shipped to London through corporate relocation channels that maintained complete privacy. Natalie's extensive collection of designer clothes, shoes, handbags, jewelry, artwork, and furniture would be carefully moved to a premium climate-controlled storage facility in her name, with 3 months of fees prepaid and detailed inventory documentation. I even arranged for her expensive car lease to be transferred to the storage facility's address and her gym membership to be maintained without interruption, ensuring she lost nothing except access to my financial support and living space. Every detail required careful consideration: which belongings were definitively mine versus shared versus hers, how to pack my technical equipment without raising questions about unusual activity, how to coordinate multiple moving services without creating scheduling conflicts that might expose the operation's scope. I spent hours creating detailed inventories and photographing everything to ensure nothing disappeared during the transition process. The logistics were more complex than satellite orbital mechanics, requiring precise timing sequences and multiple contingency plans. Jennifer's team handled the most sensitive aspects. My personal documents, financial records, and technical equipment were shipped through diplomatic-level secure channels that aerospace companies use for transporting classified materials. My drone prototypes, finally liberated from storage unit exile, were packed with military-grade protection protocols that ensured they'd arrive in London in perfect condition. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was applying the same systematic thinking to escaping my relationship that I'd used to design navigation systems for military satellites. Both required understanding complex variables, anticipating potential failure points, and executing with absolute precision while maintaining operational security that prevented detection until the final phase was complete. Departure day arrived with the precision of a satellite launch sequence, and like any complex engineering operation, success depended entirely on flawless execution during the critical window. Natalie had organized what she called a farewell celebration spa day, with her inner circle, Ashley, Miranda, and 2 other women whose primary qualification for friendship seemed to be their ability to spend entire afternoons discussing handbag choices. She'd booked them into Denver's most expensive wellness resort for massages, facials, and essential pre-relocation stress management therapy. The irony of her needing stress management for my career achievement wasn't lost on me, but her absence provided the perfect operational window. At exactly 9:47 a.m., 17 minutes after Natalie's Uber disappeared toward the mountains, I received Jennifer's text: "Ground team deployed. Timeline confirmed. All systems operational." The choreography that followed was more precise than anything NASA had coordinated. Professional movers arrived in unmarked trucks, efficiently packing my belongings according to predetermined inventories. My drone laboratory, finally emerging from months of storage exile, was handled with genuine reverence, each prototype carefully wrapped in anti-static protection, each tool secured in custom foam housing. The lead coordinator, Marcus Chin, examined my latest guidance system prototype with obvious appreciation. "These are impressive designs, Mr. Morrison. The miniaturization work on these sensor arrays is remarkable. Military contractors would definitely be interested in these innovations." For the first time in months, someone was discussing my work with genuine technical respect rather than dismissive tolerance. While my possessions traveled toward London through secure corporate channels, Natalie's belongings underwent their own carefully orchestrated relocation to the premium storage facility I'd selected. Her designer wardrobe, jewelry collection, artwork, and furniture were inventoried with museum-quality precision and transported in climate-controlled vehicles. I'd even arranged for her vintage Hermes collection to be stored in specialized temperature-controlled units, probably better care than she'd provided them in our penthouse closet. I wasn't interested in destroying her life. I was simply removing myself from subsidizing it while ensuring she retained everything she'd accumulated during our relationship. The storage facility provided comprehensive digital documentation of every item, creating an inventory system more organized than anything Natalie had maintained personally. Her BMW lease was transferred to the storage facility's address with automatic payment continuation, her exclusive gym membership was maintained through prepaid annual renewal, and even her premium shopping subscriptions were updated with appropriate forwarding addresses. By 2:30 p.m., both operations had completed successfully, leaving our penthouse in pristine condition for the incoming tenant arriving the following morning. I walked through the empty rooms one final time, checking for forgotten items. The space looked exactly as it had when I'd first signed the lease: clean, modern, ready for someone else's next chapter. At Denver International Airport, I went through my final equipment check with methodical precision. My old phone, containing 3 years of digital memories, went into an electronic recycling bin near the departure gate. The new UK phone I'd activated weeks earlier remained powered down until my flight reached cruising altitude, creating a clean communication break that would prevent tracking during the transition. The flight to London provided 7 hours of complete isolation, no calls, no messages, no digital evidence of my whereabouts. I used the time to review technical specifications for my new satellite defense project, finally able to focus on professional challenges without wondering whether my excitement about aerospace innovations was annoying someone who thought my career existed primarily to fund her lifestyle. Somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean at exactly 11:42 p.m. Denver time, I activated my new phone and composed 2 text messages completing Operation Satellite's final phase. The first went to Natalie. Your belongings are safely stored at Secure Space Denver, 1247 Industrial Parkway, Unit B 847. Access codes: Building 4829, Unit 9156. Full inventory attached. Car lease transferred to same address. Gym membership maintained through next year. Take care. The second message went to Jennifer Walsh. Phase 1 complete. Initiating London operations as planned. Then I put the phone in airplane mode and watched European city lights appear below as my new life began at 35,000 feet, exactly as calculated. 3 weeks into my London assignment, I was discovering that success tastes remarkably like freedom, and apparently, that discovery was about to trigger a digital war I'd never anticipated. My Canary Wharf apartment had become everything our Denver penthouse never was. A space where I could spread drone prototypes across the dining table without apologizing, where I could take video calls at midnight discussing satellite trajectories without being accused of prioritizing work over relationship maintenance, where the morning coffee routine involved reading aerospace industry reports instead of listening to complaints about thread counts in Egyptian cotton sheets. The satellite defense project was exceeding every expectation, with my team developing guidance systems that pushed the boundaries of civilian technology applications. For the first time in years, I was operating at full intellectual capacity without constantly calculating the emotional cost of professional enthusiasm. My secondary email account, however, had become a battlefield that would have impressed military strategists. Natalie's initial response to my text messages had been predictably nuclear, 17 missed calls to my old number before she realized it was disconnected, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to reach me through every digital channel she could identify. When direct communication failed, she'd escalated to what I can only describe as proxy warfare, deploying her entire social network as reconnaissance agents tasked with locating and pressuring me into responding to her demands for explanation, apology, and immediate return to resolve what she termed this ridiculous misunderstanding. The most concerning escalation came through her mother, Patricia, a former real estate attorney who'd apparently convinced herself that I'd abandoned family responsibilities during some kind of medical crisis. Patricia had contacted my former Denver colleagues, spinning an elaborate story about urgent legal documents requiring my signature for matters involving shared property and medical decisions that couldn't wait for normal communication channels. The narrative was professionally crafted bullshit, but delivered with enough authoritative legal terminology to make my former coworkers genuinely concerned about my welfare and legal obligations. When Patricia's inquiry reached my new London office through corporate networking channels, my British manager, David Whitmore, followed standard security protocols for protecting international executives from personal complications that might compromise their professional effectiveness. Trevor, we've received some rather unusual inquiries about your whereabouts from parties claiming urgent legal necessity, David explained during our weekly project review, his tone carrying the calm professionalism of someone who'd handled far more complex executive protection scenarios. Given the sensitive nature of your current project work, I've flagged these contacts as potentially problematic and referred them to our legal department for appropriate handling. David's 43 years of experience managing high-level aerospace projects had taught him that personal drama could destroy professional focus faster than any technical challenge, and that protecting key personnel from external interference was essential for mission success. Within 24 hours, My company's legal department had created a formal communication barrier that transformed any future contact attempts into documented evidence of harassment rather than legitimate personal outreach. Jennifer Walsh coordinated with our legal team to establish what they called a corporate shield protocol, essentially turning my company's multinational legal resources into a protective buffer that made contacting me more complicated than reaching most government officials. The protocol included automatic documentation of all attempted contacts, legal analysis of their legitimacy, and formal warnings about the consequences of continued harassment directed toward employees engaged in sensitive project work. When Natalie's network attempted to circumvent these protections by claiming emergency situations or legal necessities, they found themselves facing corporate attorneys who specialized in protecting executive personnel from exactly these types of manipulation tactics. The legal department's response letters were masterpieces of professional intimidation, politely explaining that any legitimate legal matters should be directed through appropriate legal channels rather than workplace harassment, while noting that false claims about emergency situations could constitute legal violations worthy of investigation. The most satisfying aspect was watching Natalie's amateur manipulation tactics collide with institutional protections designed by professionals who'd handled actual corporate espionage and international business warfare. Her attempts to leverage social connections and emotional pressure seemed pathetically transparent when measured against the systematic approach my company used to protect key personnel from external interference. Every phone call, email, and third-party inquiry was logged, analyzed, and filed as potential evidence of a harassment pattern that could trigger serious legal consequences if it continued. The escalation reached its peak when Natalie's high-powered attorney, Marcus Goldstein of Goldstein and Associates, sent what can only be described as a legal masterpiece of delusional entitlement wrapped in expensive letterhead. The demand letter arrived through my company's legal department claiming financial dependency, emotional damages, and seeking compensation for what Goldstein termed her significant career sacrifices made in support of Mr. Morrison's professional advancement. Reading through the 12-page document felt like watching someone try to build a skyscraper on quicksand. Impressive ambition, terrible foundation, inevitable collapse. The most audacious claim involved her assertion of partial ownership rights to my drone prototypes, described as jointly developed intellectual property created during the course of their domestic partnership, with Ms. Chen providing essential creative input and project management oversight that contributed materially to the technical innovations achieved. I actually laughed out loud at that particular fiction, remembering the countless times Natalie had dismissed my prototypes as expensive toys cluttering our showcase home, and her complete inability to distinguish between a GPS module and a camera stabilizer. The legal theory seemed to be that proximity to innovation somehow created ownership rights, as if standing near a laboratory experiment made you a co-inventor. Goldstein's letter demanded immediate financial settlement of $340,000 to compensate Natalie for her alleged contributions to my career success, plus ongoing monthly support payments of $4,800 to maintain her lifestyle standards during her recovery period from the trauma of my abandonment. The document painted her as some kind of aerospace engineer's wife whose behind-the-scenes support had been instrumental in my professional achievements, conveniently ignoring that she'd spent 3 years actively discouraging my technical interests and treating my career as a funding mechanism for her social ambitions. My company's legal team, however, approached this amateur-hour legal fiction with the systematic precision of professionals who'd handled actual intellectual property disputes worth millions of dollars. Sarah Chen, the senior partner assigned to my case, had 37 years of experience defending multinational corporations against everything from patent infringement claims to industrial espionage accusations. Within 72 hours, she'd assembled a response that dismantled Goldstein's arguments with surgical precision backed by documentation that would have impressed forensic accountants. Mr. Morrison, Sarah explained during our video conference, this demand letter represents what we call aspirational litigation, essentially hoping that nuisance value will generate settlement payments from parties who prefer avoiding conflict to fighting frivolous claims. Unfortunately for opposing counsel, they've chosen to target someone with institutional backing rather than an individual who might be intimidated by legal posturing. The counterattack was methodical and devastating. Sarah's team had accessed my complete employment records, financial statements, and project documentation dating back to my college internships, creating a comprehensive timeline that proved my professional achievements had occurred independently of any relationship contributions. They documented every instance of Natalie's dismissive attitude toward my work through social media posts where she'd complained about my boring technical obsessions, and text message screenshots where she demanded I prioritize social events over project deadlines. The intellectual property claim collapsed completely when Sarah's team provided photographic evidence of my laboratory setup, technical specifications written entirely in my handwriting, and patent application drafts that predated my relationship with Natalie by several years. But the real killer punch was the countersuit threat. Sarah's response letter included a detailed analysis of Goldstein's claims under fraud statutes, noting that demanding compensation for non-existent contributions could constitute attempted extortion under both Colorado and international law. The letter documented every instance of harassment through third parties, every false claim about emergency situations, every attempt to interfere with my professional responsibilities, creating a paper trail that could support both civil and criminal charges if harassment continued. Faced with corporate-level legal opposition backed by unlimited resources and mounting evidence of harassment, Goldstein withdrew all claims within 5 business days. The retreat was complete and unconditional, no settlement, no ongoing communication, no face-saving compromise. Natalie was left responsible for significant legal fees that had accomplished nothing except documenting her desperation for anyone curious enough to review public court records. 8 months later, I was living proof that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply building the life someone claimed you were incapable of creating. My London experience had evolved from professional assignment to personal transformation, with every day reinforcing that Natalie's assessment of my capabilities had been spectacularly wrong. The satellite defense project was exceeding every benchmark, with our team developing guidance systems that attracted interest from both NATO allies and private aerospace contractors looking to license our innovations. My drone prototypes, finally given the attention they deserved, were generating patent applications and licensing inquiries that could fund my early retirement if I chose that path. More importantly, I discovered that London's technology community appreciated actual innovation over social networking, valuing technical expertise rather than the ability to coordinate charity galas or select appropriate wines. My Canary Wharf apartment had become exactly what I'd never realized I wanted, a space designed around my interests rather than someone else's vision of sophistication. The second bedroom housed my expanded drone laboratory, where I could work on cutting-edge prototypes without apologizing for cluttering anyone's showcase home. The living room featured my aerospace models and technical achievements displayed with the pride they deserved, finally free from being hidden away as embarrassing evidence of my supposedly juvenile interests. I joined a local drone racing club that met weekends at a converted warehouse in East London, where engineering professionals gathered to test custom-built machines that pushed civilian flight technology boundaries. These weren't hobbyists playing with toys. They were serious technicians developing innovations that regularly caught attention from military contractors and aerospace companies. For the first time since college, I was surrounded by people who understood that technical passion wasn't something to be managed or redirected, but celebrated and encouraged. I'd started dating occasionally, nothing serious, just coffee meetings with women who worked in related fields and could maintain intelligent conversations about subjects more complex than luxury handbag market trends. The contrast with my previous relationship was striking. These were people who contributed to conversations rather than waiting for their turn to redirect attention back to their own concerns. Through mutual friends in Denver, I'd learned fragments of Natalie's situation that painted a picture of someone discovering the actual cost of the lifestyle she'd believed she deserved. The expensive storage fees for her belongings had apparently become a significant financial burden once she lost access to my supplementary income, forcing her to downsize dramatically by selling designer items she'd previously considered essential to her identity. Her luxury car lease had been returned when payments exceeded her actual earning capacity, replaced by a used sedan that provided transportation without making social statements about financial status. Most significantly, she'd been forced to move back to her parents' suburban home while working additional consulting contracts to rebuild her finances, a living arrangement that presumably offered limited opportunities for the sophisticated entertaining she'd once considered central to maintaining proper social positioning. The irony wasn't lost on me that her prediction about my inability to function independently had proven exactly backward. I was thriving in every measurable way, while she was struggling to maintain the lifestyle standards she'd insisted were non-negotiable for successful people. According to second-hand reports, she was still maintaining her narrative that my cruel abandonment had destroyed her stable life, apparently unable to acknowledge that her stability had always depended entirely on someone else's financial support rather than her own capabilities. The most satisfying aspect wasn't her struggles. I genuinely hoped she'd figure out how to build a sustainable life based on her own efforts, but rather the validation that my decision to test her hypothesis about my helplessness had been absolutely correct. I hadn't crumbled without her guidance on wine selection or wardrobe coordination. I hadn't embarrassed myself in London's sophisticated social circles by wearing inappropriate clothing or making unsuitable conversation. Instead, I discovered that professional competence and genuine technical expertise opened far more doors than social positioning and designer accessories ever could.